Welcome to the Codcast. I'm Shira Schoenberg. It's been a year since the first marijuana delivery companies started operating in Massachusetts. How's it going? Not so well, according to some industry insiders who are pushing the Cannabis Control Commission to loosen regulations in order to make marijuana delivery a more financially viable business. Here with me today are Christopher Fevry, CEO and co-founder of Your Green Package, which was one of the first licensed marijuana couriers in Massachusetts, and Julia Germain, operating partner at Kind Run, a delivery operator business. Thank you both so much for joining me on the podcast. So let's start by explaining that there are two different business models for marijuana delivery companies. Currently, there's 8 marijuana courier companies that have licenses to operate in Massachusetts, 3 delivery operator companies. So Chris, you run a marijuana courier business, which means you're basically like Uber Eats, but for cannabis. Someone orders from a retailer, you pick up the order, deliver it to the customer. And when I had you on this podcast back in November of 2020, you actually argued that the courier model wasn't financially viable. So how's it going so far? Can the model work?
Yeah, so we got into the courier model because we thought there was a way to actually make it work. And after a year of operating and about 40,000 deliveries under our belt, we find that with the 2 driver rule, is literally impossible. And so that's where we are today, and that's what we're here on the podcast to talk about.
And Julia, Kind Run is a delivery operator, which means you're allowed to buy cannabis wholesale, warehouse it, and then sell it to customers. So initially, industry operators, including people like Chris, had argued that this would be a more profitable model. Is it working for you?
The model is working. We're fortunate to exist in a wholesale market that allows us to capture strong margins on the products we do sell. Kind Run does also have to provide 2 drivers. We have a lot of overhead with our warehouse and our fleet. The model is working. It is a huge challenge from logistics and navigating around the regulations. I do believe the burden of that overhead burden could be reduced, but we are seeing this as a viable model.
And we'll obviously get to the 2-driver rule, but Chris, before we get there, obviously it sounds like you both have struggled with this issue, but you've told me that You've been a long-time organizer in the delivery industry. You told me you've heard from other businesses that they're laying people off or closing their doors. How big a problem is this? What are you hearing from your colleagues?
Yeah, we've heard very similar things, laying people off. We've personally shut down locations in the Western Mass and the Worcester area due to lack of delivery demand. We've seen some of our retail partners even struggle. Where the delivery operator, the big advantage for the delivery operator is that they make margins off the product, which currently Massachusetts I think is ranked like 15th or 6th, as one of the highest prices in the U.S. Whereas the couriers, we make money off the delivery fee. So if there's $100 order, the retailer might make like 50% on that, but then there's a delivery fee that needs to then be paid. Which then, there's the pie is being split in too many directions. And with a second driver, it does just make it financially impossible to operate and scale that business. And so we've experienced a lot of those things like layoffs and shutdowns. And also with increased gas prices, that did not help the situation. But other operators other couriers have also experienced very similar things where a lot of them have not been able to grow beyond 6-7 cars, or some of them have even struggled to even start due to the financial cost of the courier model.
And you mentioned you had to shut down 2 locations. How many locations do you have?
So we partner with multiple retail locations, and so we had retail locations in Western Mass and one in the Worcester area that we tried out for about a year, but they saw very little orders on a daily basis. In the single digits, even after extensive marketing campaigns and things like that. Which if you're not doing too many orders, then the location, the delivery is definitely not viable at that point in time. And so it was a mutual decision that both the retailer and ourselves had to come to. We said, hey, this is just not working. and that was pretty much it. And then we had to, lay off staff members and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Does that suggest that the interest just isn't there among customers in getting marijuana delivered?
No, not at all. There is interest, especially in the Boston area. I mean, like I mentioned, we've done 40,000 deliveries to date, and so there is a strong interest. However, the customer in Western Mass and Worcester, there's more dispensaries available. So there's a dispensary like 5 minutes, 10 minutes away from most people, and so there's no need for delivery. Also, most customers in those areas have cars, and so for them, they could easily drive versus having to pay delivery, having to pay a delivery fee and so on and so forth. And because of the two driver rule, the order minimums have to be extremely high. You're talking $100 plus order minimum. And so some customers, the average adult use basket size right now is around $50. So for some customers, for a lot of customers, actually, it doesn't make sense for them to order delivery when they could just go right to a dispensary and get it, and versus having to pay double of what they would normally be comfortable paying just to get an order delivered.
And Julia, where is Kind Run located? Have you had some of these same issues?
Not so much. So Kind Run has a very different business model. We're headquartered in Hudson, and we serve Worcester to Boston, all of the allowed towns sort of therein. About 23 separate municipalities, including all of Boston. We don't charge a delivery fee. Our minimum order ranges from $50 to $100, depending on the geographic area. But we can play with these fees and be more appealing to the consumer compared to a courier, because we're making margins on products that we sell. I 100% believe that awareness is very low. Most people are not aware that you can have adult use cannabis delivered to your residence. There's a cohort of consumers now who shop at dispensaries, and Chris and other couriers have access to those clients through a dispensary, but they're looking to change that client behavior from being an in-store shopper to a delivery client. Kind Run, as a delivery operator, we market to not just people who are already buying legal cannabis, but people for whom specifically cannabis delivery, with its discretion, convenience, no need to have a vehicle, your own public transport, it just appeals to a different demographic. So we are discovering, defining, and marketing towards that demographic. But it is, it's world building here. It's raising awareness that this service is even available, and then getting people through the experience of e-commerce for cannabis.
And the problem, the rule that you both have pointed to and would like to change, is a rule that says any cannabis delivery driver must have there must be two drivers in any vehicle at all times. So if you're going to deliver marijuana, you need two drivers in that car, or two people in that car. And the idea is for safety. The driver is better protected if someone tries to attack the vehicle, if they have a passenger in the car. It also prevents employee theft by the driver, again, by having two pairs of eyes there at all times. So Chris, why do you want to change this rule?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, over a year for adult use delivery, and, I want to say 3 years for medical delivery. I mean, there's been a total of 100,000 adult use deliveries and 200,000 plus medical deliveries with zero to no incidents. Actually, it's more likely for a cannabis delivery driver to get into a car accident than to actually, than for a vehicle to get robbed. And if you look at more advanced, and not more advanced states, but more, other licensed and open states in the U.S., Massachusetts is, out of, I think it was 16 legal states, out of Massachusetts is out of all those states, Massachusetts is 1 out of 2 that requires 2 drivers in a vehicle. It's not proven that a second driver actually does anything at all, because if a robbery or something like that does happen, they are going to give up everything. No one is trained to fight a gunman. No one is carrying firearms. If someone comes, and also you have to be very determined to rob a vehicle. I mean, because the vehicles are currently unmarked. It's an unnecessary regulation that actually, when they put out the license, they said that, it's a low cost entry. The license is going to be successful. And the point was for applicants or social equity applicants to create generational wealth. However, this second driver creates a huge barrier to entry because it increases costs all across the board. Obviously, your payroll costs are double. Your workers' comp is double. Some insurance companies actually, when you have a certain driver to vehicle ratio, we actually experienced where our insurance policy, when we had a certain number of drivers on our team, all of a sudden our policy then jumped up because our driver to vehicle ratio was too much in the eyes of the insurance company. And we're talking that was about a $20,000 jump at that time to about $115,000 policy. So, the second driver is really not needed, and we're advocating for it just out of simple necessity if the license is to survive. Like we've already explained, there's layoffs occurring, locations are shutting down, and when the commission has to review the social equity period to say, oh well, do we extend it? They're not going to have many success stories. And the delivery operator is definitely a much more advantageous position to be in because they can make margin off product. But even then, and Julia can attest this, there's a lot of challenges with having a second driver, especially in a situation of staffing, like call outs. Like if someone calls out, you can't operate that vehicle that day. And so you automatically lose that revenue. And so, ultimately why we're looking for this change is, the commission has a mission to support, people from disproportionately impacted communities, to help, allow for participation from those communities into the industry. And the delivery license was set aside to allow, people a way in. However, it's almost like they've let people in and, say, oh, gotcha. Here's a catch-22. We're going to put a new barrier to entry within the license that is going to prevent growth and prevent success. And yeah, these are the reasons why, we're advocating for this change. And, with all the deliveries that have occurred, with basically zero incidents that have occurred, there's no reason why we still have this 2-driver rule today. And on top of that, I do want to mention Massachusetts has one of the strictest delivery regulations in the US. There's already a dispatcher that has to talk with the driver every 30 minutes to make sure that they're okay. There's body cameras that the drivers wear. There's cameras inside the vehicle, there's cameras that point on the product, on the drivers, and also outside the vehicle. On top of that, the customer has to upload their ID and a picture of themselves before they can even order. And then it has to be approved. And then at that point, they can order delivery. So there's already so many security provisions in place that the second driver is just unnecessary. And we've been doing it for a year, 40,000. Like Julia mentioned, some people don't even know about delivery. A delivery vehicle can be passing by your house right now and you wouldn't even know it.
Out of curiosity, what is the other state that requires 2 drivers?
Florida.
How many states have legal delivery?
I want to say 17. I can send you the petition. It lists out every single state.
And Julia, what about you? What's your experience been with the second driver? Is it a problem for your business as well?
The second driver is an added layer of complexity that certainly we don't need, or, could certainly streamline logistics, staffing, overhead costs. We have certain instances where I would want a second driver in case we can't park if we're at a multi-tenant building in Boston, but that's a business decision. That's us saying we don't want to leave a vehicle parked unattended with additional product in it. But in most cases, a second driver is not necessary. And I will just reiterate that data does not exist from the insurers, from public safety, to suggest that last mile cannabis delivery vehicles are a target for robbery. We've been talking to insurers who work in the California market and elsewhere where there's a high volume of orders. I believe from that recent conversation, Chris, that you were on also, those agents were saying the most likely was like wholesale B2B transport vehicles at like doing warehouse deliveries at night, big trucks carrying a lot of cannabis product that are a little bit more easily tracked versus a totally randomized, in our case, Honda Pilot unmarked doing residential cannabis delivery. So, it is, we haven't found it necessary. I've spoken with my team about, their comfort level, and, in most cases, they wouldn't feel their risk increased in that scenario. And I think Chris makes a great point about what is that second driver doing in an emergency situation that simply doesn't increase the risk of the whole scenario. So having a second person present for a robbery is worse than having one person who's just going to hand over the product individually. This idea, I take serious umbrage with the idea that 2 vehicles is a necessary safeguard against internal diversion. I get this is just the disconnect between policy and business operations. Having 2 people in a vehicle does not mean if one of them wanted to steal product, they couldn't, or they couldn't both. It's I find that to be kind of a red herring argument, considering how much security and tracking from seed to sale chain of there already is. So, we can, and I've encountered this in cannabis regulated industries before, a deep mistrust in the employee, the agent, and it has not borne out in my close to 10 years in the industry. Yes, I've had employees in a production facility nip some product or in retail, but we always catch them and they get fired. And that is, an immediately fireable offense, and we have eyeballs all over it. So adding a second person to that mix isn't really, it's solving a problem that is not super prevalent and doesn't necessarily need solving, and it's not the right solve anyway.
Chris, you mentioned a petition. Tell me more about this petition. What are you asking for, and how many people are supporting you?
Yeah, so we launched a petition, Julia, was it 2 weeks ago? 1 week? 2 weeks ago, right? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Within 48 hours, we had 400 plus signatures. The people that are part of leading the petition, it's myself, Julia, Devin Alexander, Amanda Rostiano, I hope I didn't mess up her last name, Kim Napoli, Helen Gomez, so and many other industry advocates and stakeholders. And really what's being asked is, one, that immediately the rule around the 2 drivers is not made a requirement, it's made optional. If someone wants to have 2 drivers in the vehicle, that is totally up to them, but that should be a business decision. And so we want to make that optional or remove completely. 2, we would want to see the ability to deliver to no towns. So currently, if for example, I live in the South Shore area, and my town is a no town.
Why don't you explain what a no town means?
A no town means they don't allow for adult use retail or delivery. So if they don't allow for adult use retail, then they automatically cannot have products delivered to their town. So what's happened is the municipalities have decided for the private citizens what they can have delivered to their homes. However, as a private citizen, I can still go to whatever dispensary that I would want to, with no barriers. And so we're asking, for one, to open the market to towns that are no towns that we can deliver to. Like Julia mentioned, like there's a bunch of towns between Worcester and Boston that are no towns that, even though Kine Run is based in Hudson, they cannot deliver to those towns. And so
Shira, this is like more than half the towns in Massachusetts have banned cannabis delivery.
But the citizens of those towns can go to whatever store they want. And so it's something that is crippling delivery, and is limiting, how much delivery can actually grow. So we want that revised as well. And other things, for example, removing the body camera requirements on the transporter side of things. Julia's been a proponent of delivering to hotels. So say, for example, I'm out of state and I'm staying in a hotel, I can't have delivery, but I could have alcohol delivered. And so we want to remove those barriers to entry. And Julia, did I miss anything?
No, I think this is about our addressable market and how strictly constrained it is, and whether we're kind of impinging on people's rights to access legal products in the state. So I think banned towns is going to be a lot harder and less realistic, simply because of the municipal control in the state of Massachusetts. but to deliver to commercial lodging specifically would allow us to participate in the tourist market that retail dispensaries, especially in the Boston area. I mean, we are now a weed tourism state, but delivery doesn't get to participate in that. We don't even get to be listed on the list of retailers in the state from the official regulator. So we're just looking for the same sort of market opportunity that other retailers have. To Chris's point, it's great to open this set aside up to equity operators, but we can't just be sent off a cliff. This needs to be a profitable license. Both licenses should have a profitability opportunity.
And I think just that, I think there is a misconception among maybe some people outside the cannabis space that if you're in the cannabis space, you're making millions and millions of dollars. That is very, very far from the truth. And delivery companies are struggling, but also many retailers are also struggling. And what a lot of them are looking to do is like partner with delivery companies to offer delivery. However, even the smaller independent retailers cannot afford to partner with couriers because the cost is so high. And so they don't even have an avenue to offer delivery to their customers. And so what you have is pretty much a market that's kind of pigeonholed. And it's time the experiment ends on the social equity applicants. We've seen it operate for a year. We've seen the results. Now it's time to actually, apply some action and make the license better.
Although what you're talking about, particularly with the no towns, I mean, that's a huge deal. I mean, when this ballot question was initially passed, one of the promises that was made is that municipalities would have a significant amount of local control to decide whether there was cannabis being sold, being cultivated, being manufactured in their communities. So, I mean, Julia, I know you brought this up. Wouldn't that be really undermining local control to allow cannabis delivery into a town when that town has said very clearly, we don't want to legalize cannabis and we don't want to welcome cannabis retailers or cultivators or manufacturers within our borders?
I mean, I'm born and bred and raised in Massachusetts, and this is a local control state. And would it undermine local control? Yes, but how is that local control determined, and does it represent the community? And that determination depends on the town, whether that was simply a select board versus a ballot question, or a town meeting question. So I guess the simple answer is yes, it would undermine this issue of local control, but that also raises questions about how that decision was made on behalf of that municipality, by whom, and in sort of what fashion and when, because this is also an evolving industry. And I think over the last close to 10 years now, since medical started, we've proven it raises property values, it revitalizes communities, it creates business opportunity. So maybe we should leave room for evolution of thinking on whether or not, towns, the citizens of certain towns should have access to this product.
And also, just to jump in, the municipality should have no authority over what a private citizen orders to their house. If I want diamonds ordered to my house, if some people they have, medical, like, I want to say, like, you can have, things that would be considered drugs delivered to your house legally. You can have like certain prescriptions delivered to your house, and the municipality doesn't say you cannot do this. It's something as a right you have as a private citizen. If I wanted to have, alcohol delivered to my house, I can do so, and no one's gonna say no, you can't. It's a thing where we're treating cannabis different from other industries when it shouldn't be that way.
And we've got to wrap up soon, but I did want to ask about something else that Julia in particular mentioned. Do the hotel operators really want their guests smoking weed in a hotel room?
Well, that also takes a narrow-minded view of what it means to be a cannabis consumer. The answer is no, of course not, and we would never condone that, but you don't have to buy smoking products, and you can find, a suitable place to consume those. It does raise more questions, but it also, like, to say no blanket sort of makes assumptions about the way both the hotel operators look at it and the way people will behave.
Yeah, look, you can order liquor to your hotel room and get drunk and pass out, but the hotel doesn't say yes or no. I mean, again, people are going to make their own decisions, and they should be allowed to do that, but that shouldn't affect what a business can or cannot do.
And you can learn more at commonwealthmagazine.org. Chris Fevry of Your Green Package and Julia Germain of Kind Run, thank you both so much for joining me on the podcast.